The morning sun hit the kitchen counter just right, glinting off Ethan's phone where he'd left it beside his half-finished coffee. The house was quiet, too quiet, and something in that stillness pressed against my chest. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer. Almost? If you've ever trusted someone only to find out what they were hiding, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because you'll understand what came next. One swipe, one voice I shouldn't have heard, and everything I believed about family, loyalty, and love shattered in seconds. The sound of that voice still echoes in my head. That was the moment everything started to unravel. It was just after 2:30 p.m. on a quiet Sunday. The air smelled like cinnamon pancakes and coffee, the kind of comfort that made me forget how fragile peace can be. Lauren was setting the table, humming off key. Ethan was in the living room, laughing at something on his phone. Everything felt normal, too normal. Then his phone buzzed again, louder this time, lighting up with a name I didn't recognize. He didn't hear it. I did. I still remember the vibration in my hand, the way it trembled as if it already knew what I was about to find. I thought it was harmless, a coworker, maybe, but when I swiped to silence it, a message appeared, and in those few words, everything I believed about my son-in-law shattered. I couldn't breathe. The words blurred together, but the meaning was crystal clear. He was having an affair. The man my daughter trusted, the one she built her life around, was betraying her behind a locked screen. I stood there, frozen between disbelief and rage, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. My heart didn't just break for Lauren. It cracked for every promise I'd ever believed in. I didn't tell her right away. I sat in silence, watching her laugh, pouring syrup over pancakes as if her world wasn't about to crumble. My instincts screamed to protect her, but another part of me whispered that truth, no matter how cruel, was the only way to save her. That was the moment I changed. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I became a witness, someone who couldn't unsee what she'd seen. And I knew, deep down, that staying silent would make me just as guilty as him. The phone kept buzzing. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. By the time I looked up again, I'd already made my decision. This was only the beginning. The silence after truth is always the loudest. That day, after I saw those messages, the house felt hollow, like sound itself had been stripped away. I moved through the rooms as if the air had weight. Lauren must have felt it too. She kept asking if I was all right, but my voice wouldn't work. I could only nod, trying to hold the storm inside until I could face it. Later that night, I watched her sitting by the window, waiting for Ethan to come home. She looked so small, like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. Except this time, the monster wasn't under her bed. It was the man she shared her life with. When she finally learned the truth, I saw her crumble, and it tore through me like glass. Every sob, every whispered question she asked into the dark, I had once asked myself. Years ago, I went through something similar. My own husband's betrayal wasn't the same, but the ache it left behind never truly faded. I remember vowing, as I packed our things into cardboard boxes, that my daughter would never feel that kind of humiliation or helplessness. Yet here we were, and all I could think was how easily lies hide behind polite smiles and dinner conversations. For a moment, I wanted to pretend, to tell her it was probably nothing, that we could forget what I saw. But lies are slow poison, and I'd already tasted them once in my life. Protecting her meant facing the truth, no matter how much it burned. I realized then that silence would only make me complicit. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. And my choice was whether to look away or to act. The decision came quietly, without anger or drama. I would not lie for him. I would not cover his tracks. That night, while Lauren cried herself to sleep, I sat in the kitchen staring at the cold cup of coffee I'd poured hours before. I wasn't sure where to begin, but I knew this wasn't over. I could feel something in me shift, from mother to protector, from witness to seeker. I told myself one truth before the sun came up: if he thought he could deceive my family, he was wrong. I'd find out everything, every secret, every lie. Because sometimes love demands you fight, even when the person you're fighting for doesn't have the strength to stand yet. The days after the truth came out felt long and airless. Lauren barely slept. I could hear her pacing the hallway at 2 a.m, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet like a quiet confession of pain. She wasn't angry anymore, just numb. The kind of numb that frightens a mother more than tears ever could. I wanted to fix it, to give her peace. But peace doesn't come without truth. I spent most of that week at her kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills, bank statements, and grocery receipts. It wasn't just to keep busy, it was instinct. Years of working as an accountant had trained my eyes to see what others overlooked. Numbers don't lie. People do. At first, I was only trying to distract myself, to make sense of something. But then I started noticing patterns. There were withdrawals that didn't match their lifestyle. $1,200 here, $800 there, always just under the limit that would raise a flag. Payments labeled as consulting fees, though Ethan wasn't self-employed. Small enough to slip past scrutiny, but regular enough to mean something. I began printing statements, organizing them by date, and highlighting inconsistencies. It was like assembling a puzzle with pieces that didn't belong to the same picture. Each new discovery chipped away at the image I'd once had of him: a loyal husband, a steady provider. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. The credit card bills, expensive dinners in cities he never mentioned traveling to, hotel charges under fake company names. The affair wasn't just a betrayal of love, it was tied to something darker. The money trail led beyond infidelity. He wasn't just cheating on my daughter. He was hiding something that could ruin her. For the first time since that Sunday, I felt something other than sorrow. Focus. Clarity. It wasn't rage anymore. It was purpose. I'd spent years balancing accounts, finding missing decimals in spreadsheets no one else could decipher. Now, I was using those same skills for something that mattered more than any job ever had. When Lauren finally joined me at the table, her eyes swollen but steady, I showed her what I'd found. She didn't cry this time. She just looked at me with that hollow kind of understanding, the kind that comes when denial dies. We both knew what came next. This wasn't about a broken marriage anymore. It was about justice, and for the first time in days, I felt alive again. The night of the confrontation felt unnaturally calm, like the air before a thunderstorm. The house was too quiet. Every clock ticked louder than usual. I'd made coffee I never intended to drink and set the table as if routine could disguise the gravity of what was about to happen. Lauren sat across from me, her hands folded, eyes steady. For the first time in weeks, she looked composed, not unbroken, but rebuilt. When Ethan arrived, the energy in the room shifted. He smiled the way guilty men do, too wide, too late. He tried to talk about work, about traffic, pretending not to notice the envelope on the table between them. Lauren's silence told him everything. I could see it in the way his expression faltered, how the color drained from his face. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply began, calmly, deliberately, laying out the facts we had uncovered. Every statement matched with evidence, every transaction explained. Her voice was steady, almost clinical. Watching her take control was like watching a tide reverse course. For once, he was the one shrinking back, searching for words that no longer carried weight. I kept my place at the edge of the room, my hands clasped together, forcing myself not to intervene. This was her fight to finish, but inside, I was burning. Every time he denied, every time he looked away, I felt the urge to remind him of the promises he'd broken. Still, I held my silence, knowing that power wasn't in shouting, it was in restraint. Eventually, the lies collapsed under their own weight. He admitted enough to seal his own downfall. Not just the affair, but the money. The deception threaded through their life like rot beneath the floorboards. He tried to shift the blame, to soften the edges, but Lauren didn't flinch. She told him what she would no longer accept, what she was prepared to fight for. The moment he left, the silence returned, but this time, it felt different, lighter. I watched my daughter stand in the wreckage of her marriage, stronger than I'd ever seen her. The tears didn't come, not yet. Instead, there was clarity. As the door closed behind him, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet satisfaction. The truth had finally spoken for itself. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through steady voices and unshaken resolve. And that night, in my living room, silence was the sound of freedom. The morning after the confrontation felt strangely quiet. No shouting, no chaos, just the stillness that follows when denial finally dies. The house smelled like cold coffee and rain, and for the first time in weeks, Lauren slept without crying. When she woke, her eyes were swollen but steady. We were both exhausted, but beneath the fatigue, something else had settled in, a calm kind of determination. We spent that week rebuilding in silence. I handled the paperwork while she called her lawyer. The kitchen table turned into our command center. Folders, statements, timelines. Every piece of evidence we'd gathered became part of something larger, something purposeful. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about protection, truth, and making sure no one could ever do this to her again. That's when I called Martha. She and I had worked together years ago, back when numbers were my world. She'd gone into forensic accounting after retirement, sharp as ever. I told her just enough to make her curious. Within days, she was at our door, glasses perched on her nose, scanning through Ethan's financials like a hawk. She found what we'd missed, a string of payments tied not just to Ethan's affair, but to a small consulting firm registered under Rachel's name. It looked legitimate on paper, but the records told a different story. Shell accounts, Circular transactions, hidden transfers. Rachel wasn't just the other woman. She was part of something organized, something far beyond a simple affair. The realization hit like a second betrayal. But this time, it didn't break us. It focused us. Lauren didn't crumble. She leaned in, sharper, stronger. Watching her study the records beside Martha, I felt a strange mix of fear and pride. She was no longer the woman who cried by the window. She was fighting back, one document at a time. As night fell, I sat alone for a while, looking over the stack of files we'd assembled. It was growing fast, too fast. We were on to something bigger than either of us had imagined. And in that quiet moment, I felt it again. The shift before another storm. We were ready to fight. We just didn't yet know how far the fight would go. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The kind of day that starts ordinary, coffee brewing, sunlight spilling through the blinds, until one detail cracks the illusion. Lauren checked the joint account first. She froze. Then I saw it too. The balance was empty. $250,000. Gone. Every savings, every investment, every safety net they'd built together, vanished overnight. Ethan and Rachel were gone too. Their phones disconnected, their addresses wiped clean. It was like they'd evaporated, leaving behind nothing but empty drawers and broken trust. I remember the silence that followed. It wasn't shock anymore. It was something deeper, heavier, the kind of silence that swallows you whole. Lauren fell apart in my arms. She kept asking how he could do this, how love could turn so cruel. I didn't have an answer. Watching her crumble brought back memories I'd buried decades ago. Standing in my own kitchen, years younger, realizing my husband had drained our accounts before walking out. That kind of pain doesn't fade, it just hides under the surface, waiting to be remembered. But grief has a strange rhythm. It pulls you under, then spits you out gasping, but alive. As I held my daughter that morning, I felt something old stir inside me. Not rage this time. Resolve. I'd survived this once, and I'd be damned if she wouldn't survive it too. By nightfall, the tears stopped. We sat together in silence, surrounded by documents, empty coffee cups, and the faint hum of a world that kept moving without us. It was then that I realized giving up would mean repeating history, and I refused to let that happen. They thought they could disappear. They thought they'd won. But they underestimated what pain can build in a woman determined to see justice done. The hunt began quietly. No police sirens, no dramatic phone calls, just long nights, empty coffee mugs, and the steady hum of determination. Lauren and I sat side by side most evenings, combing through data Martha had pulled from old servers and encrypted transfers. It wasn't glamorous. It was patience and pattern recognition, one breadcrumb at a time. Martha's brilliance carried us forward. She traced a network of shell companies across 3 states, Nevada, Florida, and Texas, all tied to Ethan's consulting firm. Payments flowed in loops, small enough to hide, frequent enough to matter. It became clear this wasn't a single betrayal. It was a business model. Ethan and Rachel had conned more than just my daughter. They'd left a trail of victims behind. Every discovery fueled us. The grief that once kept Lauren in bed now drove her forward. I watched her transform. Tired. Yes, but fierce. She contacted lawyers, wrote reports, and documented every detail. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were building a case brick by brick. When Martha uncovered the offshore accounts, it all snapped into focus. A web of hidden assets registered under fake names, all pointing toward one destination, Costa Rica. It felt surreal reading that name on the screen. The sunlit paradise that now hid two people who had turned deceit into profit. We took the evidence to the authorities. It started small, local detectives, then state investigators. Eventually, the FBI stepped in. I'll never forget the morning we got the call. Ethan and Rachel had been found, living under aliases in a rented villa near the coast, arrested without incident. It was almost anticlimactic. How simply justice arrived after months of chaos. When it was over, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the news settle. For all the damage they caused, their capture didn't erase the scars, but it restored something else. Our dignity. Truth had finally caught up to them, as it always does. Lauren looked at me that night and said she could finally breathe again. And as I watched her exhale, I realized that sometimes justice isn't loud or glorious. It's quiet, methodical, and deeply human. Justice didn't come with fireworks. It came in a quiet courtroom on a gray morning, months after the headlines had faded. Ethan stood before the judge, pale and small, sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Rachel took a plea deal. Less time, but enough to make sure she'd never touch another woman's life the way she touched ours. It wasn't triumph I felt that day. It was release. Like the air finally cleared after a long storm. Lauren didn't attend the sentencing. She said she'd already seen enough of him to last a lifetime. Instead, she spent that morning volunteering at a local women's center. At first, it was just something to fill the time, but soon, it became her new purpose, helping women who'd been blindsided like she was. Watching her reclaim her strength, I saw a light return to her that no verdict could give. Together, we built something new out of what was broken. With Martha's help, we started a small consultancy, helping women understand their finances, protect their assets, and rebuild after betrayal. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about prevention, about turning pain into something that mattered. For me, transformation came quietly too. I stopped replaying the betrayal and started noticing what remained. Our home, our health, our unshaken love for each other. I learned that justice isn't the end of pain. It's the start of peace. Sometimes I still think about everything we lost. The money, the years, the trust. But when I look at Lauren now, standing tall and smiling again, I realize the real victory was never in the courtroom. It was here, in the life we rebuilt, one honest day at a time. Looking back now, it's almost hard to recognize the woman I was when this began. That morning with Ethan's phone feels like a lifetime ago. What started as betrayal became a journey through every shade of pain, and, somehow, toward peace. I used to think survival was about holding everything together, pretending not to break. But I've learned that real strength comes after the breaking, when you start over with nothing but truth. Lauren is living proof of that. She smiles differently now, not with naivety, but with confidence. She rebuilt her life piece by piece, and in doing so, she taught me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about forgiving yourself for trusting the wrong people and choosing to trust again anyway. I see her thriving, helping others find their footing, and I feel a quiet kind of pride that words can't touch. As for me, I've stopped asking why. Some things don't need answers, they need acceptance. Betrayal didn't destroy us, it revealed us. It showed me who I am when everything familiar disappears, and it showed me that the love between a mother and daughter can outlast any lie. So if you're watching this and you've been through something that shattered your world, don't rush to erase the pain. Let it teach you. Let it refine you. There's power in surviving what was meant to break you. I've shared my story because I believe every scar carries wisdom. Now, I want to hear yours. Have you faced betrayal and found strength on the other side? Share your story below. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Pacing and emotional arc. Overview. This story is built on a deliberate rhythm, one that mirrors the emotional reality of betrayal and recovery. The pacing is designed to pull the viewer through cycles of shock, stillness, escalation, and reflection, maintaining engagement while honoring emotional authenticity. The opening section, Hook and Inciting Incident, begins at high velocity. The phone call and sudden betrayal hit fast, creating immediate tension. This intensity then decelerates in emotional fallout and moral line drawn, allowing grief and introspection to breathe. Here, pacing slows deliberately. Pauses, quiet moments, and inner reflection set a tone of human fragility before rebuilding begins. Momentum returns and the investigation begins. Scenes tighten, sentences shorten. The rhythm becomes methodical, driven by discovery. The story enters its suspense phase. Emotional focus shifts from pain to problem solving. Confrontation night serves as the first major peak. Energy rises sharply. Tension crests, then releases in quiet resolution. From broken to battle, ready resets pacing with a restorative calm, slow but purposeful. It bridges emotional fatigue and renewed drive. The following act, the escape and loss, dips emotionally again. The lowest point in tone and pacing, a moment for silence, reflection, and restrained despair. The hunt and discovery reignites intensity, mixing suspense with satisfaction. The pacing accelerates here, but never overwhelms. Tension is offset by clarity and moral focus. Then, justice and transformation and reflection and closure bring controlled deceleration, measured sentences, softened tone, emotional release. These final sections complete the arc, from chaos to order, from fracture to wholeness. The overall structure follows a waveform, rising in tension through betrayal and pursuit, falling gently through understanding and peace. By the end, pacing and tone converge to evoke balance, closure, and quiet triumph. The story resolves not through speed, but through serenity.